In the early 1980s, Nigeria owned one of Africa's most ambitious national airlines, around 30 aircrafts, routes stretching from Lagos to New York, London, Rome, Amsterdam, and Jeddah, and nearly 2 million passengers carried every year. Nigerian Airways was more than an airline. It was a flying symbol of a country growing richer, more confident, and more connected to the world. But less than 2 decades after, almost all of it had disappeared. By 1999, Nigerian Airways had just one serviceable aircraft left, one plane for a country of over 100 million people. So how does a nation lose an entire airline? The easy answer is that oil prices crashed and Nigeria ran out of money. But that is only part of the story. Because while aircraft were being grounded, millions of dollars meant to replace and repair them were also disappearing. Payments were made for planes that never arrived. Properties were sold below their value. And according to the government inquiry, $17.6 million intended for 2 aircraft, a sale commission, and a maintenance check was diverted. Contemporary reports said the investigation identified losses and questionable transactions worth roughly $400 million and named around 90 public officials. Yet in 2018, the House of Representatives said nobody named in the report had been prosecuted and none of the identified money had been recovered. I found no public record showing that this had changed. By August 2026, about 6,000 workers lost their job. Many spent the next 22 years waiting for the remaining money they were promised. This is the story of how Nigeria built a national airline, turned it into one of Africa's great aviation ambition, and then allowed its aircraft, its money, and its future to vanish. And to understand how that happened, we have to return to the moment Nigeria first decided to put its flag on the tail of an aircraft. Are you still watching? And you're yet to subscribe to my channel? Kindly subscribe. Thank you. Now back to the video. To understand what was lost, we have to understand what was built. In the 1950s, air travel in the region ran through the West African Airway Corporation, WAAC, a colonial-era airline that served Britain's territory in West Africa as one shared operation. As independence approached, that arrangement fell apart. Each new nation wanted its own wings. So on the 23rd of August 1958, 2 years after independence itself, Nigeria got them. A new company was called WAAC Nigeria. At the start, it was not fully Nigerian. The government held 51%. The rest was owned by WAAC, a British state airline that would later become part of British Airways, and Elder Debster Lines, a British shipping company. Operations began that October, but the plan was always sovereignty. By 1961, 1 year after independence, the Nigerian government had bought out its partners completely. The airline was now 100% state-owned, and it grew fast in October 1967. Working in partnership with Pan-African Airways, the airline opened a route that made a statement, Lagos to New York, a 4-year-old African flag carrier connected to the financial capital of the world. By 1970, the operation had grown to more than 2,000 staffs. In January 1971, the colonial name was finally retired. WAAC Nigeria became simply Nigeria Airways, a national carrier carrying the national colors. For the country, this was never just transport. It was proof of arrival. And for the next decade, something remarkable happened. Nigeria found itself with the money to match the ambition. Because in the 1970s, Nigeria struck its reach. The 1973 global oil shock sent crude prices soaring, and Nigeria, a major oil producer, was suddenly rich in foreign exchange, and oil money bought aircraft. In 1970, the airline had around 8 aircraft. By 1980, it had 26. Boeing 707s, 737 Focus, and wide-body DC-10s, first introduced in 1976. The airline later operated the final DC-10 ever built. It was delivered to Nigerian Airways in 1989 through a lease finance agreement, reproposed in 1993 and later operated by World Airways. In 1981, Nigeria Airways made history of a quieter kind. It became the 40th customer to order from Airbus, signing for 4 A310s. The following year, it leased Boeing 747s to add more capacity to the London's route. freeing its DC-10s to serving Frankfurt, Paris, and Zurich. London, New York, Jeddah for the Hajj pilgrimage, Rome, Amsterdam. At its peak, in the mid-1980s, Nigerian Airways carried around 2 million passengers a year. And here is the detail that is often forgotten. During part of this period, the airline received management, operational, and technical assistance from foreign airlines. These include WAAC and from 1979, KLM, which signed a 2-year agreement designed to train staff and make the airline more efficient and profitable. The heyday, around 30 aircraft strong, came near the end of that KLM period in the early 1980s. The company's accounts were reported running 2 years behind. Some aircraft were bought with cash, while others were acquired through bank loan and lease finance agreements. When the airline ordered its 4 Airbus A310s in April 1981, the aircraft did not arrive until late 1984 and early 1985. The airline, flying 2 million people a year, that could not confidently account for its own money. That weakness did not matter much while the oil money flowed. Then the oil money stopped. In the mid-1980s, global oil prices crashed. For Nigeria, which depends on crude oil for most of its foreign exchange, the effect was brutal. The naira was devalued and import costs increased sharply. And almost nothing an airline buys is priced in naira. Fuel, spare parts, maintenance check in Europe, lease payments, insurance, all paid in dollars. Dollars Nigeria Airways suddenly did not have. Nigeria Airways did try to reduce its operation. It cost route and dismissed about 3,000 workers in 1988. But successive governments also treated the airline as a job program and a system of political patronage. Even after the cuts, the airline remained heavily overstaffed as revenue fell. Foreign assistance arrangements came and went, but they could not overcome the politics. The management changed constantly. Each new government brought new boards, chief executive, and priorities, and new opportunities for interference in contracts and appointments. The operational decline became clear to the passengers. Flights were cancelled, aircraft were grounded because spare parts were unavailable. Then in October 1993, a moment captured the chaos of the period. A Nigerian Airways Airbus 310 flying from Lagos to Abuja was hijacked by men demanding the government's resignation. The aircraft was diverted to the army in neighboring Niger. 3 days later, security forces stormed it. An assistant pursuer was killed during the operation. By the 1990s, the numbers were falling sharply. From around 2 million passengers a year at its peak, the airline carried only about 10,000 passengers during the first 3 months of 2003. An economic crisis can explain a struggling airline. Many airlines around the world reduced their operation during difficult periods and survived. It does not fully explain a disappearing airline, because while the naira collapsed and passengers disappeared, something else was happening inside Nigeria Airways, something the crisis conveniently concealed. The assets were walking out the door. Years later, when journalists and investigators examined what happened during the 1990s, they found a pattern. One former senior employee described it as an organized system of bribery and asset stripping involving airline workers and the government officials responsible for supervising them. Payments were reportedly made to companies that, in some cases, did not exist. The methods described by the official investigation read like a playbook. Fraudulent invoices, bills paid for services that were never provided, payments made for aircraft that were never delivered, money went out, no planes came in, free tickets were given in large numbers to friends and associates, reducing revenue 1 seat at a time, and physical assets were sold. This includes Nigeria Airways House in London, the airline property in one of the world's most expensive cities, which was reportedly sold for less than half its value. In one case, the panel says $17.6 million intended for 2 aircraft, sales commission, and a major maintenance check on a Boeing 737 was diverted by 2 airline officials. The panel also recommended that one of them, a retired Major General, refund $4.35 million deposited for MD-11 and ATR aircraft that were never delivered. Money for aircraft, no aircraft. Multiply that pattern across a decade, and the fleet number showed the result. Nigeria Airways had roughly 30 aircraft in the early 1980s. By the time a civilian government took office in May 1999, it had exactly one serviceable aircraft, one aircraft for a country of well over 100 million people. The airline was not only losing money, its aircraft, its property, and other assets were also disappearing. The new government decided to investigate what had happened. In 1999, Olusegun Obasanjo became president, ending 15 years of continuous military rule. His government established a judiciary commission headed by Justice Obiora Nwazota to investigate what had happened inside Nigeria Airways during the military era. The commission completed and submitted its report on the 8th of May 2002. A draft white paper was submitted on the 18th of November that year. The finding was finally released publicly in November 2003. They were staggering. Contemporary reports said the inquiry identified losses and questionable transactions worth roughly $400 million. It named around 90 government officials. Among them were 2 former aviation ministers, the very office responsible for protecting the airline. Despite the report, the names and the recommendation to prosecute, the House of Representatives said in 2018 that nobody named in the report had been prosecuted and none of the identified money had been recovered. I found no public reports showing that this had changed by August 2026. Nigeria Airways stopped operating in 2003, with reported debt exceeding $528 million. This was despite government reportedly injecting around $200 million during its final decade. Formal liquidation followed in 2004. At the end, the airline that once carried 2 million passengers a year was serving 9 destinations with 1 serviceable aircraft of its own and 2 leased aircraft operating international routes, while thousands of employees remained on the payroll. About 6,000 workers lost their jobs: pilots, engineers, cabin crew, and ground staff, many with decades of service. The former workers and their unions said the severance settlement eventually totaled 78 billion naira. Part of it was paid, leaving an outstanding balance of about 36 billion naira. By July 2026, the federal government had established a committee to arrange the payment of the remaining money. And by August, there was still no public confirmation that the final payment had been completed, 22 years after the airline was liquidated. The collapse of Nigeria Airways never really ended. It just changed shape. Successive governments tried to create a replacement. Virgin Nigeria, a partnership with Britain Virgin Group, came and went. Then between 2016 and 2023, federal budgets reportedly contained allocations totaling more than 85 billion naira for a project called Nigeria Airs, a new national carrier that never carried a single scheduled passenger. However, the amount budgeted was not necessarily the amount released or spent. Former aviation minister Adi Sirika claimed that only about 13 billion naira was released and that part of it remained unspent when he left office. The airline stage unveiling in 2023 was described as fraudulent by the House of Representatives Committee on Aviation. The same institutional weakness that killed the first airline resurfaced to stop the second. Thank you for watching. If you like content like this, kindly like and subscribe to my channel. Thank you. See you in the next video.